Hello, good morning, everybody. We're ready to go here. I hope you all are enjoying this beautiful fall weather. It's chilly again here in New York, but it is great inside to be sharing this time with you today. Now, I understand there are many new folks joining us. So, for those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Tom Viola. I'm the executive director of Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, and I look forward to getting to know you here and perhaps having the opportunity for us to meet in person at some point so that I can say thank you and welcome. Today, I am excited for you, as valued members of Broadway Cares family, to join us as we open the virtual doors of our office for a conversation focusing on the housing support and services that empower our entertainment community, as well as many, many, many others across the country. So, today, we will hear from three remarkable organizations and learn more about how your support provides critical supportive housing and services both here in New York City and across the country, truly representing what we mean when we say what we do together makes a difference. I'm also happy to say that we'll be joined by Broadway Cares major gifts and planned giving officer, Mr. Nick Mayo, to moderate this conversation. So let's get the show on the road. Our first guest has dedicated over 2 decades to HIV prevention and advocating for the LGBTQ community across the nation. A trusted and respected leader in his community, he has led multiple initiatives to create safe spaces for marginalized communities who are experiencing hardships due to their sexuality, gender expression, or HIV status. Since joining Allies in Hope, located in Houston, Texas, in 2019, he is focused on establishing essential preventative care services and providing housing support for people living with HIV and AIDS. Please join me in welcoming Chief Executive Officer of Allies in Hope in Houston, Texas, Mr. Jeffrey Campbell.
Good morning, Tom. Thank you
Hey,
so very
Jeffrey.
much for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good morning, Jeffrey.
Good
Is
morning,
it
Nick.
fall weather in Houston today?
Are we having what?
Are you having any fall weather in Houston today?
Well, it's fall in Houston language, so it's not quite as cool as it is in New York, but it is cooler. So we'll take that. I know I will.
There is so much to talk about, Jeffrey, about the amazing work that's going on in Allies in Hope. Before we dive into that, I just want to say to everyone who's joining us today, please feel free to use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We would love for this to be a dialogue. If there's anything that comes up that you have a question of Jeffrey or Tom or myself, please do use that raise the hand feature and we'll call on you and you can ask your question. So, Jeffrey, you've been with Allies in Hope since 2019.
Yes, I came in 2019. I came out of actually the health department scene where I'd spent about 4 years and was recruited in at that time in 2019 as the chief program officer and was promoted into the role of CEO in March of 2023.
Wonderful. You have a lot of scope there at Allies in Hope. You have 8 different housing support services.
Yes.
We could talk at length about each of them. I'm real interested to sort of iris in and zoom in on the Help House apartments. Can you talk a little bit about those and what those offer to the community in living with HIV?
Sure. So we have three programs that are directly funded by HOPWA. Help House is one of those. That is actually a complex that we as an organization own ourselves, and it is for individuals without children. It could be a person or it could be a couple, but this is a child-free environment. And we provide housing services there and also other resources that individuals living with HIV need in order to be successful, in order to manage their viral load and the success of being virally suppressed and living a healthy life.
Talk to me about some of those those services, because I would think the hope is that you come into the supportive housing and we give you resources to then go off and live independently. Can you talk about some of the resources that are offered within the housing service?
Sure, sure. So again, I think this phrase was coined many years ago, housing is healthcare. And what we believe is the first step is to ensure that our clients are housed, that they feel safe, that they have what they need within their residence so that the housing comes fully furnished. We have case managers and other resource supporters there on site on a five day a week basis, and then for emergency needs over the weekend. We link individuals that are residents of Allies and Hope programs to our Stone Soup food pantry. Stone Soup is it's over 30 years old now. So it's sort of a legend here in the Houston area as a food service provider to individuals who are food insecure. We also link individuals to mental health services. And those are very critical. One of the things that I learned early on in my career in this work is that there is usually a mental health diagnosis very close to an HIV diagnosis. It either comes before the HIV diagnosis or after. And many times it's simply related to depression. And so what we are able to do is link people to mental health resources, to licensed chemical dependency resources that help them to manage and many times overcome specific addictions to drugs that may impair them in such a way that they would not be taking their medication on a daily basis, and so have a harder time achieving viral suppression.
It's amazing. There's another program that you guys have that I'm real interested in, which is the Bridge Reentry Initiative. Can you talk
Yes,
a little bit about
yes,
that and the role
yes.
that, yeah.
Yeah. So Bridge Reentry, or BRI, is what we call it for short. Bridge Reentry started out as a pilot. It was funded by the resource group here in Houston through HOPWA funding from the state, and it was started in 2018 as a program for a housing program for individuals living with HIV who were coming out of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and coming out of TDCJ for short. They needed a place to stay. In Texas, it is next to impossible to get a lease in your name if you have a felony. And so we had these individuals who were coming out of TDCJ and unable to find housing, safe housing, in equitable housing, I would say. And so TDCJ knew that we had a program called Wall Talk, where we go into the prison system and we provide sexual health education, HIV and STI prevention education in the prisons. And so we had already started relationships of sort with individuals living with HIV within the prison systems. And so they were already reaching out to us for resources, saying, I'm going to be released in 9 months. I'm going to be released in 6 months. And so the resource group knew that and funded us as a pilot for 1 year. And so now 6 years later, we are successfully serving 17 clients. They come to us first in a short-term sort of emergency status. It's 60 days where we house them in an extended stay hotel. And while we're working with them in those first 60 days, we are working to see, one, can we place them at Bridge Reentry or BRI, or do we need to find other housing resources for them around the city? And we have been successful in placing all of those individuals in a safe and healthy space so that they can continue or really begin their lives and reconnect to a treatment provider so that they're getting their medication and being treatment adherent and becoming virally suppressed.
Jeffrey, could I ask a question? In addition to
Sure.
BRI, Allies in Hope, is this viewed as finding folks permanent housing or finding folks supportive housing that gets them to another permanent housing residence?
Both. So we do have permanent supportive housing, and so BRI is transitional. As since we mentioned BRI, an individual can stay in our BRI program up to 18 months. Help House is a permanent supportive housing program. We haven't mentioned Burris Street, but I know a lot of our Broadway Care dollars have gone to Burris Street, which is a permanent supportive housing for cisgender and transgender women living with HIV. And I love mentioning that because here in the South, and particularly in Houston, having spaces that are safe for trans women is really hard to find. So I am very, very thankful to lead an organization like Allies in Hope that provides these services for trans women living with HIV.
I think it's incredible the work you're doing. And also, everyone here in this room should hear that and feel your own fingerprints all over that care. The fact that your support makes these things possible. When you mention someone who's recently leaving the prison system, I think about stigma. In HIV, we try to fight stigma in HIV. Talk about stigma on top of stigma and how to get resources and tools to then go live and not only a prosperous but healthy life. So it's really incredible what you do.
Yeah. And stigma is something that, I believe is still really at one of the root causes of this continued HIV epidemic. And until we really are able to address and destroy stigma, among other things, economic inequality and medical deserts and food deserts, things of that nature, we're still going to be dealing with an HIV epidemic, particularly here in the South and in Texas, which it's also very important for us to have conversations about having people together in a housing program where you can really bring the service to them. And even if that's, we know we have Ryan White dollars. We know, all of our patients, or not patients, but our residents that are living with HIV, they are connected to treatment and care. And when they're connected to treatment and care here in Harris County, we do have a high percentage of those individuals that are virally suppressed. However, things happen. Recidivism, going back into the jail or prison system. I would say if they start using again, drugs, alcohol, things of that nature, for choices that put them at risk for not being treatment adherent, and then making them not virally suppressed, but having them in this space where we can see them at least 5 days a week and be on call for emergency matters over the weekend. That's very important. And I think that makes a difference in the life of every individual who's part of our housing programs.
Jeffrey, what was the name of the food? Do you say you have a food bank there that that supports the your guests?
Yes, it's called Stone Soup.
Stone Soup.
Yeah, Stone Soup is probably about 35 years old. This organization itself, Allies in Hope, is the oldest HIV serving organization in the state of Texas. We're about 43 years old. And in that, Stone Soup came along about 35 years ago. And it was funded by Ryan White at the time. And at some point, Ryan White changed their guidelines, that funding was pulled. And I'm happy to say that the recently deceased Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee did a lot of work to get private and public funding to help support Stone Soup so that we could continue to keep it going. And so now we have 2 Stone Soup locations, one at our Midtown location, which is just outside of downtown, and one at our Southwest Houston location.
So what was a separate organization is now a program of Allies.
No, it was always a part of the organization.
Oh, got it. Okay.
But at one point, when it was funded by the Ryan White
Mhm.
grant funding. It was a freestanding in a freestanding building, and now it is incorporated into the buildings that we have other services.
Great.
When you talk about the longevity, and you're the first AIDS service organization in the state of Texas. First diagnosis in Texas was 1981. You were
Yes.
established in 1982, and you had your first housing in 1984. So I want everyone to hear in this room that sort of front-footed engagement is what you're making possible. You're
Yes.
making possible that immediate action. It's not let's sit back and think about it. We have our first diagnosis in 1981. And then a handful of years later, there's already a housing program for people living with HIV. So everyone in this room is making that possible, that speed of response. So thank you for the work that you do in Houston. I look forward to chatting at the end of the conversation with the rest of our guests. But just such a fan, and thank you so much. We'll see you at the end of the webinar.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jeffrey. Good to see
Thank
you.
you, Tom. I
Nice
appreciate it.
tie.
Thank you.
So, moving on. Our second guest is a leader with a passion for youth and community development. Her life's work has been committed to empowering young people to reach their fullest potential despite the tremendous challenges many of them face. She has an exceptional ability to develop holistic and inclusive youth development initiatives that are geared towards serving marginalized youth in search of hope and healing, as well as housing. Please welcome, from Covenant House, New York, Chief Executive Officer Dr. Shakeema North.
Hey, good afternoon.
There you
Thanks,
go.
Tom. Hey, Nick,
Hi,
how are you doing?
Doing very well. Those plants behind you look so happy.
Thank you so much. I've been trying. This is my one of the hobbies that I developed during COVID. So
That's one of the good hobbies. A lot of people just started
yeah.
drinking wine. You do plants. That's very better use of your time.
Right.
Well, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I just want to remind everyone in our virtual audience, please, this is a conversation. Use that raise your hand feature. If you have any questions of Dr. North or Tom or myself, we'd be happy to hear from you. Dr. North, talk to me a little bit about Covenant House. I read a statistic recently that said more than 2,200 young people wake up in the Covenant House bed every day. Can
Yeah.
you talk about
Actually, it's a little bit more than that. It's about 2,400 to 2,500 young people wake up in a Covenant House bed, and that's across our sites throughout the United States, Latin America, and Canada. But right here in Covenant House, New York, last year we served, over 1,500 young people and provided over 140,000 nights of housing to youth experiencing homelessness in the New York City area.
Can you talk me a little bit through what happens when this young person arrives to the Covenant House? What is their experience? How are they greeted?
Yeah.
And yeah, talk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So young people, first and foremost, is how they find us. And one of the things that we learn from them is that they find us by doing a Google search of youth shelters or support for young people experiencing homelessness. And Covenant House is usually the first one that pops up in the search. And so when they come to us, the first thing is they are greeted with love and respect, because our idea and the goal is to help them to understand that you have now reached a safe space, right? We don't know at the point that when they walk in the doors what it was that they were going through that caused them to have to seek support from us. But the first thing we want them to have a sense of is a sense of safety and stability as they work to figure out, right, who these new people are that they are really trusting to help care for them. And so they come into our space, they meet with our intake workers. The first question is, are you hungry? Right? Did you eat today? Do you need something to eat? Do you need a shower? Right? And then they meet with our intake workers. And from that point on, we help to get them acclimated to our community, to what becomes their new community of support, and to the services that we provide to them.
I was just thinking, if that didn't exist, where would these young people find themselves? If these services weren't
Yeah.
there, and if it wasn't a priority to greet, as you just described, with trust and
Yeah.
respect, what
Yeah.
would the alternative be? And that's just a very dark
Yeah.
situation, a place to think.
Yeah. And we hear that a lot from our young people. They often say they don't know where they would be, right, had Covenant House not been there to be a resource for them. Some of our young people come to us having experienced human trafficking. They are coming from abusive households. Some may have come from, other countries, right, seeking safety and respite from spaces that just are not safe to live in. And I guess the answer to that question would be they would probably still trying to survive and make it work in unsafe and unstable situations. But because we exist, they don't have to do that.
It's really incredible. I'm sure you see a lot of different stories, and everyone
Yeah,
working at the Covenant House has probably experienced a lot through these young people. Is there anything
absolutely.
or anyone that comes to your mind when you think about a specific person that walked in those doors and needed some trust?
Yeah, I mean, I often say I have the privilege of doing this work that I feel called to do, and because this is the work that I feel like I've been placed on this planet to do, and I have the privilege of meeting um, young people every day who come to us not knowing what to expect, and then I get to see their growth and them working on their path to stability. And one of the recent examples that comes to mind is this past June we hold graduation for our young people because part of the services that we provide is around education and employment. And we want them to be able to attain those, key life skills so that they can sustain themselves beyond their time with us. And so in June, our 32 young people graduated from high school or the GED program in June. And I was meeting with one of our young people who had come to us, who was trying to escape an unsafe situation in his country. He ended up migrating to the United States as a minor. And he was an unaccompanied minor, came to us. And I remember the first time like he walked into our space, just very scared, trying to figure out like what he could get involved in. And I spent a lot of time just, helping him. And at this time I was in my former role in youth development. And so I'll fast forward. He kind of traversed through all of our programs. So he did our life skills training and programming. He did our CovWorks programming. He ended up getting support from our legal services team. So he was able to get work authorization. He finished the GED program. He was able to then get enrolled into a local community college and is now working as an intern at a Fortune 500 company in New York City. And so every time I talk to him, I'm like, I remember when you were scared to move to transitional housing because the only thing you knew how to cook was rice, right? And when I went to visit them in the transitional housing space, this was before he got his own apartment because he actually has his own apartment now. He was teaching his community how to cook cultural meals that he learned how to cook back home. And so they were cooking cultural meals in the space. So really just to kind of see where a young person is when they come to us to kind of, looking through that transition and being able to support them through that transition to now see, for example, this young person has his own apartment, has an internship at a Fortune 500 company, and is still enrolled in college. It's just amazing to see.
And he's teaching his community.
Teaching his
That's
community.
the,
Yeah,
you maybe he always had that in him, the desire to give back, but he
mhm.
didn't have a foundation to then give back. You gave
Yeah,
someone a foundation to then move forward and give back
yeah.
in the way he, that's
And I
really
think
incredible.
that's key about all of the young people that we serve. The least interesting thing about them is the fact that they're experiencing homelessness. There is a lot of hope and potential that they just need to have someone help and tap, and then we can help them to live into their greatness.
We actually have a question from someone in our virtual audience. Areli, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello, Dr. North. I
Hi.
just wanted to say that I really appreciate the work that you're doing, especially for young people. I know I've been in that situation before, and it can be a very daunting experience, very stressful, and it can take a huge mental toll. And so I was just curious to know, like, how do you keep these young people motivated to keep going and pushing forward and looking at the light at the end of the tunnel? Because again, as someone who has been through this sort of situation, it was very hard to stay motivated. So how do you support young people to keep going? And again, thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that question. We create an inspiring culture and a loving environment for young people. Three of the pillars that we operate on is that we're strength-based, we're trauma-informed, and we're resiliency-focused. And being strength-based, which is one of the pillars that kind of gets to your question, is we highlight the good things that are going on with our young people, and we don't focus on the perceived deficits or the things that are going wrong. And so at every point and in every interaction with staff people in our building, our young people are being encouraged, you know, even if it's just, encouraging them and honoring their decision to make the choice to come to our doors and seek help, right? You made a good choice today, right? You have decided to allow us to help you. And it's not a bad thing to be in a position where you need someone to help and to care for you, because we are all in this world together and we're all a part of one community. So we spend a lot of time affirming our young people, helping to build them up, helping to create opportunities for them and make sure that opportunities are available for them to have exposure to things so that they don't always have to be reminded of the fact that they're experiencing homelessness. A couple of weeks ago, we had two buses of young people who went to Six Flags to Fright Fest. Because that is important as well. Like when you're able to live a normal life, right? The normal life of a kid who, maybe had those supports and had not had to deal with, what they're having to deal with now. We try to create that for them so that they can experience joy, because I think that's important as well. Young people need to have opportunities where they experience joy, and also affirm for them that, this is just a page in your book, and the pages are going to continue to turn, and so your days are going to get better, and encouraging them not to give up.
Dr. North, thank you so much. And Areli, thank you for that wonderful question. That hope, that joy, that the pages of the book, the many pages that they have to write on. I thank you for all the work that you're doing, and thank you to everyone here for making that work possible through your support. Dr. North, we will see you at the end of the conversation when we all come back together. Thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. North. So let's go on to our third guest. With a background as a musician and arts worker, our next guest is committed to building sustainable communities in the arts. He currently oversees direct services, development projects, and works closely with government agencies to increase access to affordable housing for people in the performing arts. Please welcome, from the Entertainment Community Fund, Executive Director of the Actors Fund Housing Development Corporation, Daniel Arnow.
Thank you, Tom. Good to be with you, and
good to see
good
you.
to be inspired by all our colleagues doing this amazing work.
Well, I'm so happy you're here, Daniel. I would love to know, can you give me a quick history of when the Housing Development Corporation started as a subsidiary of the Entertainment Community Fund? When did that start?
Sure. And, as many of you know, Entertainment Community Fund, National Human Services, we support everyone in the performing arts. Core areas include social services, health, workforce development, and of course, housing. Our housing work is really threefold. We do a lot of educational programming, which I hope we can talk more about. We do a lot of advocacy right now. We're working a lot on artist housing in New York City. And then we develop affordable housing and supportive housing and have a growing portfolio Our first work in this space was really with the Dorothy Ross Freeman residence, previously the Aurora. It was a project that was actually built as luxury condos in the mid 90s and went into default. And we stepped in with a development partner and using low income housing tax credits, turned it into supportive housing that it is today, really designed to serve a mixed population, people living with HIV/AIDS, seniors and people with disabilities, and people working in the performing arts. And we have on-site social services there. We have the Wallman Living Room, which is a senior center, wonderful programs. But that was our really us dipping our toes into the housing space. Since then, we've built our portfolio with more properties here in New York City, in Los Angeles. We're hoping to work more in other cities where there's really big and robust arts and cultural communities. And then we've also built out our other programs through the Housing Development Corporation because we're not going to build enough units to house all the arts workers who need housing. So we have other educational programs to help them access housing too.
I would love to hear about that. This Housing Resource Center. What are some of the resources? What are some of the programs? What are some things that people can sign up and educate themselves at that Housing Resource Center?
Yeah, we offer a lot of different things through the Housing Resource Center. One is educational seminars and workshops, really aimed at helping people understand how to apply for affordable housing primarily. We also have some programs about just navigating, finding an apartment on the open market. I'll circle back to that in a minute. We do one-on-one consultations to help people apply for housing, assess their income for housing. If they're denied from housing, from affordable housing, we help them with appeals. So we do those one-on-one consults. And then we also have an online housing bulletin board, which is just a really good place for people to find sublets and room rentals and an apartment on the open market if they need something more short term. But I would say the most unique and biggest challenge that folks in our community face in finding housing has to do with the nature of their income. These are episodic workers, arts workers with income that fluctuates a lot. It goes up and down, not only year to year, but you're seeing it like fluctuate wildly month to month and week to week sometimes. They have a lot of different sources of income, some W-2 incomes, some 1099 incomes, some unemployment. And it's sometimes hard to verify. And all of these housing programs are based on you need to qualify based on your annual household income. So a lot of our programs help people educate them on how to navigate the affordable housing space, the lotteries, eligibility criteria, tenant selection, with a special focus on how to assess their income, represent their income so that they can be more competitive in the process. And we're doing a lot of work to help the applicant primarily, but we also work with cities and developers and these third parties called marketing agents to help them understand how to look at this income so that everyone can have really good methods for assessing income so that, it's not so challenging for this community to qualify for housing.
Makes a lot of sense. Tom, did you have something?
I do. Hey, Daniel, could you talk a little bit, going back to what used to be called the Aurora, and now it's called the Friedman Residence up on 10th Avenue and 57th Street. I know there are three populations who are housed there. And this, can you talk about the importance of the distinction of those three populations or who that's made available to?
Yeah, of course. So my training is as a planner. As Tom mentioned, I have a background in the arts too, so I feel really fortunate to be doing this housing work and serving the community. But in planning, we think a lot about building, diverse communities, mixed income communities, and these buildings, particularly the Aurora, truly has a mixed population. We have a number of contracts that allow us to serve different populations. One's with a state agency known as OTADA. You'd have to forgive me for not being able to break down the name, but OTADA allows us to serve a lot of people with disabilities in the building through that contract, helps support our social services. We also have a HASA contract through the New York City HRA agency, which allows us to serve people living with HIV/AIDS. And then, of course, core to our mission is serving people in the performing arts. And of course, people fall into all three of those buckets, right? So we're serving a mixed population. We have, I believe, 27 one-bedrooms, generally prioritized for people with disabilities who wouldn't be able to live in shared housing because the rest of the units there are shared housing, right? So we have a lot of 2 and 3 bedroom, 1 4-bedroom apartment where each tenant has their own rent stabilized lease, but shares the rest of the apartment with their roommate. Very common living situation in New York City and many places across the country. But this building is located on West 57th Street and 10th Ave, in the heart of Manhattan, a real amenity-rich, resource-rich community, steps from the theater district, steps from Central Park. And we're actually really excited to be embarking on a rehab of the building, really to ensure that it can be sustainable both physically, financially, and better serve tenants for the next 15 years. But it's a really unique and important asset, not only for us, but for the performing arts community and really New York City more broadly.
Well, thank you for that incredible work and also those resources. When I think about, the entertainment community and just having access to those resources, I feel lost. I can't navigate this. It can feel so dense that it can swallow you, but to feel like you have resources to advocate on your behalf and education to go out and advocate for yourself is really priceless. So thank you for all that work. I would love to quickly welcome Jeffrey and Dr. North back to the virtual stage for a shared conversation. And once again, if anyone has a question in our audience, please use that raise the hand feature. I was thinking while all of us were talking, during this time, I feel like we're all, the word gratitude is shared a lot, right? Gratitude. I can't control much, but I can tap into my gratitude. And how many times you hear people say, well, I can't really think of anything. I guess I'm grateful to have a roof over my head. That's usually the first thing that people go to. And that privilege that the privilege of having a roof over your head. The work that all of you are doing is creating pockets of gratitude, creating safety. I wonder, what's each of you, something that's keeping you up at night, thinking like, I can't get either, this is bothering me, this problem that we have, this challenge that we're faced with, or I can't wait to wake up in the morning and get to work on that. So think in your head, what are some of the things that are coming to your mind about what motivates you, or what is a trend that might be alarming in terms of supporting those who are suffering from homelessness, experiencing homelessness?
Nick, I can go ahead and jump in. One of the things that keeps me up at night, particularly about this work and what we're seeing, is the number of people that we have to turn away because we don't have enough space to accommodate them. And last year alone, we turned away 700 young people who came to our doors looking for a place to stay, and we could not support them in terms of residential, care at the moment because we didn't have any space, right? And of course, when that happens, we'll work with that young person to try to find alternative placement. But the reality of the situation is the system is oversaturated, right? And so there aren't many places for young people who are needing a place to stay to go. And so that has been just really hard for all of us to deal with, to accept, even, it looks different even for our intake workers. I met with a group of them a few months ago where they were asking me to consider having social workers now in our intake space because once we have to tell a young person that we have no place for them to stay with us, just the response that they were receiving required even additional support for that young person, even in that intake space. And so it really has taken a toll on, just our staff, but then also, being someone who wants to save the world, right? And cure all the ills, that we're seeing, I that keeps me up at night. And then what I am grateful to, when I wake up and say I'm going into the office today and I'm going to work on this thing, it is really to try to work with some of our partners and figure out what can we do more to create, affordable for youth housing, so that whether you're talking about permanent housing, whether you're talking about supportive housing, what can we do more to have some of those resources available so that young people, once they come to our doors and we can get them the care that they need and we can set them up with the tools that they need, then they can move quickly on to stability in terms of their apartment, and then we can start to help the next group of young people, until, of course, which the ultimate goal is that this is not a need anymore, because part of what we want to do is work to really end youth homelessness as we know it. But for right now, the thing that keeps me up is just just how great the need is, and the fact that so many young people are in this are having been made to be put in this predicament where they have to go out and fend for themselves, and part of that is also finding a place to stay.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I could also jump in. I mean, in terms of what keeps me up at night, I mean, the housing crisis and the housing problem is vast, and there's not one solution. So I find my mind spinning at all the different solutions. It's funding, it's zoning tools, it's making sure our government agencies are well staffed and well resourced to support our efforts. And then the disconnect between all those solutions and just making sure the people that we house are stable and healthy and have high quality services. So trying to kind of connect all those dots. And then in terms of like what gets me out of bed and gets me to work every day, I I think the arts community is just so important to the health of our communities in so many ways. I mean, people go on about the economic impact, but forget about that. The social impact in terms of strengthening our communities, um, uplifting our spirits, and being able to support this vulnerable population, often low income, vulnerable in so many ways because of the episodic income, and being able to increase, hopefully, not only housing production, but artistic production in our communities through these stabilizing services kind of gets me to work.
I saw Maureen, one of our audience members. Did you want to raise your hand? And no isn't totally acceptable answer. I saw that you raised your hand and then it went down. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to ask a question if you had one. No? All right. Well, what about you, Jeffrey?
So for me, it is, and I'm sure my colleagues will agree with me. It is just, I, I don't know if you would even call it red tape anymore. It is just sometimes so difficult to get a person off the street and into safe and secure housing. I'm personally, navigating with it's someone I'm too close to, someone I've known since the day they were born, and they will be 40 years old in January. And I know their mental health diagnosis. I know why they're homeless. I know, why they weren't homeless 3 days ago. So I know all of these things, and having to try to navigate the system to try to make sure that they land in a place that is safe, where they have case management. They are not a person. Both parents are deceased. Sister is, moved away, and I am not biologically related to them, but there's this sense of responsibility called Jeffrey. And and so trying to navigate through that and ensure that, and in that I see, because I'm kind of now the the case manager in a sense. So I see a little bit more of what I don't normally see as the person who's running the organization. And I see the pitfalls, I see the challenges that we come up with. And so to make this thing easier, because most people, I mean, really, who wants to be without a roof over their head, a warm place to sleep, a place to have a hot shower, a safe place to keep their belongings. You know, we know what mental health does. But on a day-to-day basis, people feel better about who they are and how they show up in the world when they have housing. And I just think we need to make that process easier.
Of course. Maureen did raise her hand again. So I think we have someone who is inspired or has a question. Maureen, please feel free to unmute and ask your question to the group.
Hi, sorry about that, about all the raising and lowering, but I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I was just curious if our champions here could share a little bit about what they are finding are some leading causes of homelessness for the population they serve.
Yeah, I mean, so for us, it varies in terms of what we're seeing. So when we, particularly in New York City, when we had the influx of newcomers coming into the city, maybe about the summer of 2022, most of our young people that we were seeing were newcomer youth or undocumented youth, and were seeking, asylum in this country. So, fleeing from unsafe situations in their countries of origins. And so we've seen a lot of that over the past couple of years, which was different from what we had been seeing prior to that, where we have been seeing a lot of young people who have aged out of foster care, young people who had experienced human trafficking, young people who were in abusive situations. We also have about 30 to 40% of the young people that we serve identify as LGBTQ. And so they have been disconnected from their families and their communities because of their sexual orientation and gender identity. And so for us, it varies. But the issue, the challenge where we had newcomer youth coming in, that just added another piece to it for us, and a lot of our young people sit in the varied intersections of those challenges as well.
Yeah, there's so many levels to it. There's the systems level, like vacancy rates at an all-time low. We don't have enough supply. Rents are rising a lot faster than wages. I would say at the personal level, increase mental health and clinical needs coupled with employment challenges. We're seeing a lot of that in our industry. But then, just for example, we worked with a couple recently. They had come to one of our seminars, learn how to apply for affordable housing. And they reached out right after. They said, thanks so much for the seminar. Great information. We are still wildly overwhelmed and don't know how to do this. We need help. And it turns out they were, lifelong performers, union folks, worked in conservatories and on stage. They had been living in an apartment for 40 years, market rate, not regulated. New owner. It had transferred down to the next generation. And the landlord wanted to increase their rent by over 100%. And on top of that, they had a mobility disability in the household and lived on the fourth floor. So it's like they were facing eviction. And it took years to get them rehoused. They even kind of won the lottery and declined it because it was not a good fit for them and they weren't prepared to move. Ultimately, we got them rehoused in one of our buildings, rent stabilized, affordable building, and luckily they had housing security. But for so many, because we don't have enough affordable housing, the other option, is being unhoused. So.
Maureen, thank you so much for your question, and thank you everyone who asked a question. I love when this is more of a conversation than just us up here speaking. So thank you for unmuting, and I hope we answered your question. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Personally, I just want to say thank you, Jeffrey, Daniel, Shakeema, and I'm going to pass the virtual microphone over to Tom.
Sure. Well, first thing, I want to thank you, Nick. Terrific interviews, very, very wonderful. And I want to be mindful of our time here together and make sure we can get on with our day. So thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Dr. North. Thank you, Daniel, for joining us here today. Thank all of you for tuning in today and stepping into our virtual office during this very critical time. The challenges are only going to become more challenging. While we face unknowable challenges, there's that word again, to come. I take great comfort in knowing that we walk together as we try to accomplish this work and make a difference in the lives of folks who don't have access to the resources and power, frankly, that we do. Thank you again, and have a wonderful fall day wherever you are.